So welcome to this talk. My name is Alexander Bell. Now let me begin by asking you this question. What do you really, truly, deeply want more than anything else in the world? Because the most powerful driving force in our life is our deepest want, our deepest desire, because we always get what we want. Now on the surface it may not look that way, but actually our subconscious desires override what we think we want. So we may think we want success, and we may think we want to be loved, but subconsciously we actually want to reject love, or subconsciously we want to be a failure because it brings some kind of dysfunctional security. And we do get security from those dysfunctional sources. So when you really look deep in your heart and ask yourself, what is it you really, truly want more than anything else? Now, there's a good chance that you'll find that the answer to that question is to be loved. That's a very common answer to that question. You might find the answer is to be safe. And of course, love and safety are very much connected. You might find the answer is to be free. And you kind of get the idea of the kind of deep desires that are at the core of our being. They are what drive our life and drive our choices and drive our behavior. Because if it's, I want to be free, and society is telling us, and we've been conditioned to believe, that you get freedom, or you experience freedom by doing such and such, or by living this kind of a life, or by behaving in this kind of way, or by thinking or believing these particular beliefs. We believe those things will make us free. We've been conditioned to believe that we'll find freedom by pursuing a certain avenue of action, or thinking a certain way, adopting a certain belief system. And of course I can go into a whole talk about why that's not how you find your freedom. You find freedom by breaking free of all that restricts and limits you and controls you, which essentially has its roots in fear, everything. So, we have these deep core desires, for example, for freedom, for love. Love is another example. If our core desire is to be loved, then we've been conditioned and we've been, steered by life to believe that if we are to be loved, we have to act a certain way. We have to be a certain kind of person. We have to be cool, or we have to be popular, or we have to be sweet and innocent, or vulnerable, or we've been conditioned to believe that we will be loved when we behave in a certain way, and that we are lovable when we act in a certain way. And of course, that's not true. Because, first of all, you are unconditionally loved by God. Whether you believe in God or not, God is a reality, and God is the love that you're truly looking for. God is the love that your heart is truly looking for. But even if you don't believe in God and you want to be loved, what you're looking for, you're actually looking for unconditional love. So what your heart really yearns for is unconditional love. That means love which is given to you no matter how you behave, no matter how you present yourself. Love which is which is never withdrawn. A love which is never withdrawn, no matter what you do, no matter how you behave, no matter how many mistakes you make, what kind of idiot you behave like. The love is never withdrawn, and we're all searching for that. In fact, that's among one or two core desires in the heart of every human being, is the desire for a love, a complete, all-encompassing love, which warms us to the bone, which is never withdrawn. And ultimately, that is the desire, that is the yearning for God. Because when we know God experientially, not through some belief system or through believing what we're told, but when we experientially know God, when we experience God's presence, then when we relax and allow God to come into our body, into our heart, and come closer to us, and we drop all resistance to God, then we find that His love is the love that goes deep into our bones and sets us free. It's the love that heals. We have to let that love in. You could call it the divine fire of God, the love of God's heart, and it warms us to the bone when we let it in. Now the problem most people have is that They don't know it's there, for a start. They don't know that love is a reality. And I can assure you it's a reality which you can experience and perceive for yourself. You don't have to take my word for it, but you need to kind of open your ears and accept that I might be telling the truth, and I might know what I'm talking about. And I do, after 25 years of exploring the divine realms, looking for God or wanting to come closer to God. And, I have a strong relationship with God, having discovered that he was a reality, or his presence, his divine power is a reality, and that I can merge or allow that power to permeate me. And that's what you need. You need God to permeate you. His love, his light, his warmth, his power, his healing. It needs to permeate through every cell of your body and really go right into the core of your being, to the core of your bones. Every single part of your body needs to be permeated by this radiant, loving power of God. And it can happen. It's possible. All that is needed really is your openness, because we are all subtly resisting God. If we're in a state of fear, then we cannot be open to God. It's absolutely impossible. You can't be in fear and be open at the same time. If you're in fear, then you're in a state of tension. If you're in fear, then there will be tension in your body. I guarantee it. You just have to do this experiment for yourself. Whenever you feel afraid, whenever you notice that you're afraid, look at your body, and there'll be tension held in your body, either in your shoulders or your arms or your chest or your back, your stomach especially, or your neck or your face. Whenever you're in fear, tension is present in your body, and especially in your heart. That's the first place it starts, in your heart. Now, if that tension isn't there, if there's no tension in your body and no tension in your heart, it is impossible to be in a state of fear. Impossible. So as you learn to relax in the presence of fear, as you learn to notice when your body is tense and tight in a state of fear, and fear is resistance, by the way, tension is resistance. Whenever we resist something, we tense up. It's like a barrier. We make our body a barrier, and our muscles densify, and we become like armoured, almost armoured to the thing that we're resisting. And so resistance and tension are the same thing. And fear causes resistance. Fear causes tension. Now, of course, we understand that we have to resist evil, or we have to resist temptation, but that occurs in the mind, not in the body. Because evil approaches us in our thoughts. It wants to make us think certain things, believe certain things, get lost in our thoughts, and our judgments and our criticisms and our self-criticism and self-judgment and our angry thoughts. It wants us in that realm. It wants us to generate negative emotions through negative thinking. It's the only way we can experience negative emotions is through negative thinking. And so that's where evil approaches us, in our thoughts. And that's where we need to resist evil. That's where we need to resist temptation. It all begins in our thoughts. We think, I want this, or I desire this thing which I know which is bad for me, or I'm angry with that person, or I would like to punish that person, and so on and so forth. All those thoughts, when we buy into them, then they create negative emotions in our body. And we've allowed evil access to our heart, which is a very, very bad idea. So we have to resist evil in our mind and resist temptation and all the things, all the beliefs and ideas which we know bring us negative emotions. Because that's all illusion. That's all the lies of the enemy. Especially, berating ourselves, belittling ourselves, weakening ourselves, feeling weak and punishing ourselves, criticizing and judging ourselves. We are our own worst enemy. We are our prison guard. We are a torturer to ourselves. It's only coming from us. And so when you can free yourself from those negative, self-defeatist thoughts, those fearful thoughts, those angry thoughts, when you can have a disciplined mind to not let those thoughts suck you in, then you will never feel negative emotions. You will never feel angry. You will never feel afraid, because you know that those emotions come from untruths, lies. God's truth is what you need, and God's truth is impermeable by evil, by negativity, by darkness. God's truth is ever radiant, all-pervading, capable of transforming anything that comes close, any negativity, any darkness, any fear. So this is what we need to do with our mind. We need to protect our mind and kind of fortify the gates of our mind so that it's like a gate. It's, you can see these old castles and old moats, castles with moats and drawbridges in storybooks and in movies and things, and really our mind is the door to the castle, and if that door stays closed and the drawbridge stays up, then the castle, which is our heart, where we dwell, that castle is impenetrable. It is fortified beyond imagination. Nothing can penetrate that castle if the drawbridge is pulled up and if the gates are bolted closed. And the drawbridge is like our thoughts. We access a reality by thinking about it. So when we think about something, we're kind of dropping down the drawbridge to what we're thinking about. We're saying to this thought, okay, I'm going to give you access to my body and to my heart. I'm going to let you make me feel. I'm going to allow you to make me feel something. So if you engage with a thought about someone who's done you wrong, then you're dropping the drawbridge to that thought, and you're saying to that thought, okay, you're allowed to bring the emotions into my body. You're allowed to create emotions now in my body related to this thought, this angry thought, because I've dropped the drawbridge, and you have access now to the sanctuary, the inner sanctuary. And it's only ourselves who can allow that, make that decision to drop down the drawbridge to towards any thought whatsoever. This is what happens when we think. When we choose a thought that we're going to get involved with, we are dropping down the drawbridge, opening the doors and saying, okay, I'm going to give you permission. I'm going to give this thought permission to access my heart, my emotions, my body. And then, of course, we feel the consequences of doing that. And this is why the greatest discipline we all need to learn is to keep that drawbridge up. And only drop down that drawbridge, which means only give our attention, only get involved in the thought if we are confident that it is going to have a benevolent or beneficial effect on our body and on our heart, on our emotions. Because we need to stay strong. And we are the ones who weaken ourselves. We are the ones who are allowing in the enemy by dropping down the drawbridge and opening the gates of the castle to negative thoughts, to thoughts of anger, judgment, criticism, selfishness, weakness, any negative thought whatsoever. We need to keep the drawbridge firmly up and secured, and then we are protected from any threat, anything disturbing our peace, which is the peace of God. We can be in that peaceful sanctuary, undisturbed and protected all the time, if you want to be. Nothing can force you to surrender your peace or surrender your joy. Nothing. As I said, we are the ones who are dropping down the drawbridge to every thought, as if thoughts hold no threat. And of course, they don't really hold any threat, but they do have an effect. Every thought has an effect, and the effect is what you feel as a result of engaging with that thought. And so you've got to choose what you want to feel. You've got to choose what you want to feel in your body and in your heart. What do you want to experience? Do you want anger? Do you want turbulence, insecurity, fear, hopelessness? As it really comes back to what I started this talk with, which is, what do you really, really want deep in your heart? What do you really, truly want? Because if you want peace, if you want to be untouchable and protected and safe, and really most people do want this, if you really want to be completely safe, completely protected, completely at peace, and completely loved, then you need to keep that drawbridge up. There is no other way. God can't keep that drawbridge up for you. You are the one. You have free will, and you are the one choosing to allow in the enemy into your inner sanctuary, your fortified sanctuary. You're the one dropping down the drawbridge and opening the doors to allow yourself to be negatively affected or negatively manipulated by the enemy. So, The enemy can't do anything except maybe convince us. Say, yeah, this thought's really interesting. Why don't you get into feeling angry? Why don't you judge that person? Why don't you criticize those people? Why don't you think about all the bad things that have happened to you? Why don't you think of all the mistakes you've made in your life? Why don't you make yourself feel guilty? This voice, it's a voice of persuasion, and it wants us. It just wants us. It's just enticing us, encouraging us to drop down the drawbridge and open it up to this whole world of negative thoughts. Because it wants to feed off the negative emotions. That entity of evil, what you could call it the ego, in fact, but it's an entity of evil, dysfunction and evil and darkness, which is what the ego is, essentially. It feeds off the negative emotions we feel inside. It feeds off them. It's a parasite, and it feeds off the negative emotions in your heart. And so it wants to persuade you to give it access. It wants to persuade you to get involved in the thoughts which will create negative emotions. And it's doing that all the time, all day long, sometimes all night long. It's persuading you to drop down the drawbridge to certain thoughts. Thoughts of failure, thoughts of anger, thoughts of criticism, thoughts of judgment. So that it can feed off you, so it can feed off your negative emotions. Now, this is a very, very accurate description of what happens in your mind and in your body and in your heart. I can guarantee you, because as I said, this has been my field of exploration for the last 25 years, so I can guarantee you, this is what happens in your mind. This is what happens in your heart. And you are the one who chooses whether to drop down that drawbridge and open your doors to the influence of the enemy, or whether to keep the drawbridge firmly up and secured.